Pete, why now for Mark McGwire to make this so-called admission?
Because he knew he had to speak and address this before he got to spring training. Because coaching would have been impossible for him. I think there would have been so many distractions if he left it unsaid. And in one way, I really completely believe that there's something idyllic about his love of coaching. I mean, I've talked to Matt Holliday and to Skip Schumacher and the Duncan brothers, and how he would take them into his house in the off season and work on them all the time. I understand that's really important to him to come back, be in uniform, and coach. And I understand that it would have been a distraction if he didn't address it. So I understand the timing. This gives him enough time before, say, February 15th, whenever players start to report. At the same time, I don't know how you felt, Dan, but I just felt that, my goodness, I mean, for him to think that we would believe that performance-enhancing drugs had nothing to do with hitting balls 600 feet, I think most people out there are going, what?
I know. I thought he got so far to have this day where you're sitting down with Bob Costas in a live interview and you finally have a chance to move forward. Be honest, tell everything. You don't have to name names. You don't have to do anything other than, yes, it did help me hit more home runs. I don't care what he says, even if he doesn't agree with that, Pete. It did help him get back on the field in his mind, so therefore it was a performance-enhancing drug, and therefore how do we know what is real and what isn't real with his home run total? And those are things that he didn't answer last night.
I agree. And I mean, that notion, you touched on a very important point. I mean, okay, maybe whatever, the drug, whatever drugs, and T.J. Quinn did have even Mark couldn't remember, but T.J. Quinn had specifically what he used. But even if it didn't, that wasn't why you got bigger. The fact is, those drugs allowed you to work out for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it did impact the game. Now, and I felt sad because I really like Mark McGwire a lot. I remember one time I was doing one of those Sunday conversations with him. It was in '96. And out of the blue, in the middle of this interview, he basically trashed himself over the dissolution of his first marriage. I mean, it was stunning to me. I mean, it so ate him alive. And all of a sudden it just came out. He was terribly critical of himself. I remember in '98 being there, doing some things with him, and he hit a home run, and he was way ahead of the bar. But it was a game in which they lost like 4 or 5 in a row. And Todd Stottlemyre came out, knocked the first 2 guys down, threw a shutout. McGwire hit a home run that took it from, I think, 5-0 to 6-0. And after the game, it really touched me that he didn't want to talk about it. He said, look, you guys, talk to Todd Stottlemyre. He just turned the team around. My home run is meaningless. And I think he believed that. And I remember when we we're doing about 1 hour of television after he hit his 60-second home run.
Yeah.
But we were talking about how we really respected the fact that up at the podium was Mark McGwire, his son, his ex-wife, and his ex-wife's husband. Because in the end, Mark McGwire really knew, all right, he had to have this relationship because it had to be all about the kid. And I mean, you and I talked about that and how much we both respected him for that. But at the same time, when he got to this point, somehow he couldn't let go. I mean, yes, he did have a great swing. Yes, he was a very intelligent hitter. Yes. I mean, there was a great old scout, Joe Stevenson, who called me when he was at USC and said, this guy might be the greatest power hitter of all time. Yes, he hit 49 home runs in as a rookie, but there were a lot of dots that weren't attached. And he never quite went from 94 to 98 in that conversation. He basically ignored all that went on in between that period.
Yeah, and you touched on the word that came to mind when I watched it. I just felt sad for him because he waited for this day, and he didn't get everything off his chest that I think he needed to. But let me ask you the poll question. Do you think the admission helps with you writers for him in the Hall of Fame?
No, I don't. And yeah. I say that because I think, okay, he definitely did. And I think that and the point I think that Ken Rosenthal has made for months has been, if it weren't for his power, he wouldn't be in the discussion.
No.
And he didn't do anything to take away from the discussion about his power. And there are still so many cases where we're saying, okay, did they or did they not? I'm afraid, and I'd be very sorry if there were a couple of players that were completely clean, who are tainted because of their physical size or whatever. I mean, Mike Piazza said to me last spring, there had been a story about, well, he clearly was a steroids guy because he had acne on his back. And he came up and he talked about it for a long time. And I thought, if he is completely innocent, I feel terrible for him that he's thrown in this. And somehow his accomplishments might go out the window. I mean, I've asked people who are close to Jeff Bagwell for years, because Jeff Bagwell is one of my favorite people I've ever known. And you look at Bagwell coming up next year, I compared him to Rice. I mean, there isn't the only category that Rice was close to Bagwell is hits. Otherwise, Bagwell was ahead of him on everything: homers, OPS, whatever you want, RBIs. And if indeed he is completely innocent, there are people who are going to say, well, he was big for a while and then he got small. Well, he did have the athletic shoulder and couldn't lift the weight for 5 years. But if he's innocent and ends up not making the Hall of Fame because of other people, well, that's very sad.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a few of those. Before I let you go, what's the one question you would have asked McGwire last night that Bob didn't ask?
Well, no, I think he asked the question about 6 times about the home runs. I mean, Bob, he did it. When I was interviewing Alex Rodriguez, this interview wasn't going any further if I repeat the question past twice.
Yeah.
I thought Bob did a remarkable job coming back, and I believe he asked the question about, do you really believe there's no connection between steroids and the home run totals? I think he asked it 6 times.
Yeah, it was. Bob did a great job of, in an hour, asking the same question in a different way, 7 different ways. So still didn't get the answer, I think, that we were hoping for, but we'll see how this plays out over the coming weeks, and certainly when he gets back into baseball as the hitting coach with the Cardinals. Good to visit with you, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it.
All right, Peter Gammons from the Major League Baseball Network.